Unfudge Your Marketing, where I chat with business owners about past experiences they've had with marketing that didn't go as planned or hoped and share the lessons that they've learned with all of you. I'm your host. I'm Christy Mitchell. I'm a marketing strategist and consultant. I work with professional service business owners who have relied on referrals and word of mouth to build their business, and they know in order to take it to the next level, they need to finally think more strategically about their marketing efforts. I'm really excited today to welcome on my guest, Teresa Intag. She has over 20 years of experience with human resources and recruiting. She designed a unique recruiting firm to disrupt the traditional recruiting model with her first company, Intag Hire. Recently, Teresa also launched a second business, Tag for HR, focused on supporting HR professionals of SMBs. She is passionate about innovation, quality, and building a supportive community within her companies. With that, I will welcome Teresa.
Hey,
I
so
know
good
it's
to
so good to
see
see you
you.
too. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. I normally like to start out just to give our listeners a little background on how I know you. So we've known each other for a while now, and I think it all started from LinkedIn. Isn't that right?
I think it did. Well, we had a mutual friend who was doing a presentation and you commented on there, and I loved your comments. And so I
Yes,
started
yeah.
talking to
So
you.
right there,
Yes.
there's the power of LinkedIn for all of those people who are questioning what
Yep.
LinkedIn can do for you. Teresa and I got to know each other. We, got on a networking call, and eventually we ended up working together. And I helped her with her marketing, and that was a couple of years ago now. And we've just kept in touch
Yeah.
this whole time. And you've welcomed me on to talk at your roundtable events about personal branding. And so I feel like I've known you forever now.
I know.
Oh,
It
we've
has been a
never
while.
we've never had
It's
this
awesome.
conversation, so I'm really excited to talk
Yeah.
today about an experience that you shared with me regarding your social media efforts. And I think this was like in the early days of your business. Is that right? Yeah.
Hmm.
So why don't you
Yes.
tell us a little bit about kind of where you were at in your business and what led you to making the decisions that you did about hiring someone to help with social media?
Yeah. So, the business, it was early on, but we were starting to grow a bit and trying to expand our market. And of course, when you're a small business, every nickel and dime is so important. And so we were trying to figure out, I can't do it all. It was at that point where I'm starting to get bogged down. And how do I try to expand marketing efforts so that I'm not slowing down, our process with marketing? And I had a referral from a friend who, said, "Oh, this person's really cheap," which they were, which was great. They were super cheap monthly. They helped out with social media posts. They would design them and created quite a bit for us. It was really good, but it died out really fast. Like they only had so many ideas, and the capacity was limited. And I had to constantly start managing them. I had to do a lot of evaluation, a lot of tweaking, a lot of, making changes, and got to a point where I was spending almost as much time coaching them as I was if I was just doing it myself. So then you're like, okay, is it,
Mhm.
worth it or not? But then to top it off, we found out later that they were reaching out to some people on our list, on our contact list, on their own to sell their other business that they had going on. So they were building up their contact list, I think, from some of their marketing clients. Yeah. So, and it was like one of those businesses that's like, kind of, you're always like, is that a real business? Is that, so anyway, it was a bit, unprofessional in that sense. It wasn't the end of the world, but the price point was perfect, but sometimes you get what you pay for.
Mhm.
And that's always the struggle, in small business of like, so it did its purpose for a few months, but we had to get out of it pretty quick, as soon as we
Mhm.
realized that. But it was, even though, I mean, you're always going to make mistakes. You're always going to hire wrong people for certain services. But that's part of the learning process to see, I feel like, what worked, what didn't work. But yeah, that was interesting. That like, you just kind of got to know who you're working with.
Yes. Oh my gosh, there's like so much nuance, I think, to that. Like different layers to like peel back on that story and just different things that like really did not go well. So it's interesting to hear you say that it was going well at first, because I feel like often that's not what I hear from business owners. It's like, oh my
Right.
gosh, it was a train wreck to begin with. So it's interesting that like the initial seemed okay and you're like, all right, this
Mhm.
is going to be great. And then it just kind of quickly faded. One thing, unfortunately, I do hear that's very common in what you said, I hear from a lot of other business owners, is that problem of like needing to be so involved. It's like needing to feed them more information so that it's the content going out isn't, and I don't know if this is what you experienced, but I've been hearing this a lot lately. Like the content that's going out is just very generic. It doesn't feel like customized to that specific company and their brand and their tone of voice and what makes them different, because you really do pride yourself on how you do things differently in the recruiting space. So was that kind of an experience that you had
Yes.
with the content?
Yeah, it was,
Maybe a little bit of a delay in that.
that's always the challenge. Oh, edit that out.
Go ahead.
It's always a challenge. There's always like the challenge of how to get that marketing across when you're a unique service. That's our biggest obstacle with working with marketing companies. How do we get the messaging to be compelling in the way that we know we're compelling, but people who aren't in our industry don't really quite get why we're compelling. Yeah.
Right, right. So with specifically the social media efforts, what did you decide to do at that point? I mean, it sounds like, you once, especially when you identify those big red flags, you're like, all right, we need to end this relationship. But then what did you decide to do next?
So then we decided, okay, we'll spend a little bit more on our next option that we'd come across, which was, a monthly service that they just do so many social media posts a month. And we would have one meeting, to review all the content, and it went okay. Like, it wasn't bad. It was professional, and it was professional looking, and it was pretty consistent. But at about 3 months, ran out of material again, or it started to get really generic or really off track. And we were back in the game again of, okay, we got to manage it. We got to tweak it. It's not worth the spend on it. So that's when we started evaluating, do we have somebody in-house that could possibly help to do this, where I'm going to be coaching them anyway, but they're going to be growing, with me and the business. And so they have the baseline, and they're only focused on our stuff. They're not focused on, 20 other clients. So they have to, get things out quickly, as opposed to quality.
Right, right. So how does your social media stand today? I actually don't even know. Do you have someone? Is it internal?
Not
Or
working if you don't know. Today, actually, it is good. It can get, I think sometimes you always have the trouble of running out of content no matter what. And we can kind of start falling into the lane of being too salesy or too promotional. And learning, the hard part is learning what's working in social media right now. Like, it changes and evolves too, and keeping up with that. But I would say, compared to where we were, we're better. It's not perfect. We're not a big company with a big budget that we can do really fun, cool things all the time, but we're better, and we're more consistent, and we've got a lot more process to our postings. Like, we do certain postings on a Tuesday, certain postings on a Friday, and we try to keep that routine going, where, some of it's educational, some of it's informative, and some of it's, just sharing industry information from other articles. But that's the thing. But what's interesting to me, which I always like your take on this, what's interesting is all of those posts are really helpful. They're really good to get our information out there. But the things that people engage with are the personal post, which is the toughest to do.
Yes.
So I was curious, is that the norm out there?
I love that question. I mean, I can tell you from my own experience I'm super active on LinkedIn. That's the platform I'm on. And I
And you're
definitely get
brilliant.
more.
Your
Oh,
stuff is
thank you.
brilliant. I love
Oh,
it.
you're so sweet. I definitely get more engagement on my personal posts, and I've started taking some of those. I just did that this week from an experience that happened that was like so top of mind. I'm like, I have to write about this right now. So I posted on LinkedIn and I sent it in an email, a little bit edited version in my email as well, and to my list. And the response I got was just so nice. Like I got like 4 people who responded to my email that I hadn't talked to in forever. And they
Yeah.
just told me how much they loved and appreciated the message and how it really resonated with them. And like it's just such a good feeling to hear that, right?
Yeah.
Especially when you're the one writing the content and to get that feedback. But back to your question, I think it's very normal for that,
Mhm.
for the personal experiences. And I think it's really important for businesses to remember that because so often they get in this routine of, okay, we got to talk about our services. All right, let's share a testimonial. Let's tell people about this industry, news thing that's happening that's super relevant to our audience. We need to talk about it because everyone else is talking about it, right? It's very, I think that's the trap we get into, is just thinking that's the kind of content we have to put out because we're a company and we're
Right.
professional and it's important for us to portray this. And I mean, I have some clients, like I analyze their social media data and like to see like what are the top performing posts, like what could we do more of. And for one in particular that I'm thinking of, it's like anytime their company is featured in the news,
Mhm.
then that's like a post that gets a ton of engagement because some employees share it and then it expands the
Yeah.
reach and people are like, oh, that's so cool, you guys won this award or whatever it is in the news. And then I have another client, they get a lot of engagement on LinkedIn whenever they announce a promotion of somebody within the company. So
Mhm.
we were actually on a call recently. I was joking. I was like, well, you just need to promote somebody every few weeks and like that's gonna help your social content. But I say that because it's like it's the personal stories, but it's also I think the people aspect, right?
Yeah.
Like in those examples I shared,
Humanizing.
it's about people, yeah, and
Mhm.
humanizing the company.
Mhm. Yeah. I think that that is pretty powerful right now, and I think everybody's looking for connection, and so the more connecting you can do it, which is really what marketing's for, but it's hard to remember because,
I know.
you just kind of get into the routines and yeah. And I
I
loved, I wanted to mention this too, like early on, one of the big differentiators for us that helped us, was working with you, and we were barely doing anything and understanding, we didn't understand the strategy. And that was the thing that you were so good at helping us with, was mapping out, the different parts to marketing and how some parts might get more impact than others depending on what we're doing. And that became, it's hard to juggle them, but as a business owner, but that is what we strive for always, is how do we become multifaceted with our marketing, dynamic, and play with it to see kind of what works and not be afraid to play a little bit with it. I,
Yes.
I think that that really, I mean, and I would say we, I can't say that we're like the best marketing people in the world. We're not, for the way we do, but we are way better than we used to be. And so we're progressing. And that strategy was really helpful to help us figure out, where to focus the efforts or where we were really missing the mark in marketing.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. I always feel a little bit guilty when I have my past clients on the show because they say nice things about me, and I'm like, I promise that wasn't the goal of bringing them
You
on,
did
but
not
I
pay me.
appreciate it. I did not. I did not. You received no compensation for this.
No.
I appreciate that. Well, so there's a couple of things I want to talk about. First, going back to like the humanizing aspect, right, of our marketing and how it's building relationships. I think that's what so often I think marketing gets equated with advertising, right? It's just, okay,
Mhm.
how do we push our message out? How do we get in front of
Yeah.
as many people as we can? And like, that's what's most important. People need to know who we are and what we do and why they should work with us. And that, I mean, this, right? Because we work together, but that's really what I try and help business owners get away from, because it's when you can shift your mindset and think about your marketing and how are you building relationships with
Yeah.
potential clients, it just totally changes the name of the game and what you're
Mhm.
focused on and how you're approaching that content. And maybe you are going to be a little more personable and vulnerable in content that you're creating and give people a peek behind the curtain and not just try and be this nicely polished company, face putting out there, and really let people learn about you and learn about, the founder of the business and some of the employees and all of those things that, like you said, people want connection.
Yeah. And it's hard. It's hard being vulnerable, because you're like, oh, you want them to respect the brand, and the quality of the brand. So you have to kind of have, that eye on it as well. But, yeah, because that's so important to us. Like we have to build trust with our clients and because of the way that the model's designed. And so, from the beginning, we have to really try to not be too flashy or too, over the top. We have to be a little more practical coming across but innovative at the same time that we're doing it
Hmm.
differently. That's a hard balance to figure out. But that human component, if you can connect with those pieces on a human component, it is pretty powerful when you can figure out how to do it. Yeah, there's a lot more, not even engagement, just recognition. Because I think that's always a surprise to me when I have people comment on something personally to me. Like they tell me in person that,
Mm.
oh, I saw this and da da da. And I'm like, you did? Because they didn't make a comment. They didn't like it or anything,
Yes.
So you
Yes.
think that, oh, it must not be engaging with people. But sometimes it is when you don't realize it.
Yes. I feel like every few months I post about that on LinkedIn. That whole fact that like you don't know who's watching. Just because someone isn't commenting or liking it doesn't mean you're not reaching them. I just had that experience. Someone just messaged me, I think last weekend. Someone I know back from when I used to work in higher ed. Like that was years ago, many years ago. And he just reached out and he was like, "Hey, I just wanted you to know, like I don't come on LinkedIn very often, but when I do, I love to see your posts." And I'm like, I haven't even seen you like at all ever like ever since then. So it is true. You don't know who's watching and you don't know the impact you're having because people
Mhm.
aren't necessarily going to share that.
Right.
Hopefully they do eventually when the timing is right. But that's a really important marketing lesson for all business owners to hear is just because you're not seeing the type of result you thought you might from an effort doesn't mean that it didn't do something for you and that
Right.
it's not reaching more people than you even realize.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah.
All right. So as we are coming up on our time together, I want to just ask you, I know that I feel like there's been lots of little nuggets and pieces of wisdom that our audience can get from this conversation, but is there anything you kind of want to leave our audience with in terms of lessons learned from your experiences that we've talked about or anything that you felt like you didn't quite, get the chance to explain?
I would say I always love to say this to business owners, especially trust your gut. If
Mm.
you are feeling like something's not working or something's not right with your efforts, then it may be. And what works for other people isn't always going to work for the same people. There is a strategy and a formula, so to speak, to marketing, but it doesn't always work with the right audience that you need. So pay attention to kind of that sense you're getting if you feel like something's working or not. You may be right.
Yes, I love that. You are not the first guest to mention trusting your gut. So I always appreciate when there are these like common threads that keep happening throughout these conversations. So that's awesome. Thank you so much, Teresa. I really
Thank
appreciate
you.
your time and your willingness to come on the show. If anyone wants to connect with you, what is the best way for them to do that?
Yeah. My last name is very unique, Intag, Intag. So Intag Hire is, where to find me. And on LinkedIn, Teresa Intag. Reach out to me with any questions around HR or recruiting. I'm always happy to help with advice.
Awesome. Thanks so much.